microphones and video when not speaking. Thank you. So item 1, apologies. We've received apologies from Councillor Russell and Councillor Pullinger, and Councillor Grant Fage apologises that he may be a little late. With regard to the meeting itself, we've under consideration, we've decided that items 7E, Wildflower Meadow, 7F, Apollo Gardens Play Area and Financial Settlement, and item 7G, Future Adoption of Play Areas, should move to be exempt items. But to do this, according to the rules, we need to have a vote on this. So all those in favour of moving those to exempt.
Point of order, before you do that, can I declare a non-pecuniary interest in 7F? So I won't vote.
I would have got to that anyway, Councillor Straw.
No, but I think before the vote go.
Okay, thank you. All those in favour of moving those items to exempt? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Right. Declarations of interest other than Councillor Straw? Thank you. Moving on then. Public open session. Do we have any members of the public? I can't see behind me. No.
Helen, can you confirm?
No. Okay, thank you. So we move on then to the minutes of the meeting of the Public Land and Open Spaces Committee of Tuesday, the 28th of December, 2021, starting with page 5 on the sets, which is page 1 of the minutes. So page 5, Councillor North.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm a member of the committee, and either I was present or I gave my apologies. I'm fairly sure I was present.
Okay, thank you. We'll note that. Anything else on page 5? Page 6. Page 7. Okay, thank you. Back to the agenda then. Do the matters arising, huh? Matters arising from the minutes. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Okay. In that case, we move on then to items of consideration. And the first item, first, can I have somebody, are these approved? Can somebody move these approved? Thank you. Councillor Fage is just joining the meeting. So it's item 6, items for consideration. A, Buttercup Mead. I call on the Head of Governance and Strategic Planning to introduce the item on Buttercup Mead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, councillors will note the report that's been submitted in the pack here around the Buttercup Mead consultation process to date. The recommendations which the report calls for at this stage, which is for members to both consider the report and the recommendations, is that members could consider and agree to the proposed Buttercup Mead seating area plan, potentially also part of this committee, and to note that there is a pressing timeline for officers to secure the Section 106 funding for this plan from Central Bedfordshire Council. To note also that enable members to submit to Central Bedfordshire Council the 3 quotes that we are still gathering for Buttercup Mead area, and to agree that the work should commence as soon as practically possible in that area.
Town Clerk wishes to intercede.
Aye, okay.
I'm not sure it's brilliant actually, the mic, but I think this probably works better. So if I can just try and translate that into what we need to consider. So firstly, it's we will be drawing down an amount of roughly £5,000 Section 106 monies. That will definitely be the case. We've been in consultation with Central Bedfordshire connected to that sum of money. Yeah. There are effectively two options for members to consider in the pack. One option for the design of this area is a kind of standard design, which would be effectively cleanse the area, green the area, have two park benches in there, but it be fundamentally cleaner and tidier than it currently is. That's option one. Option two is as per the design that we have here. Is that right, Karim? Yeah.
Yes.
And I'll ask Karim and Jonathan to explain the design of this and to try and be clear about what the responses have been from the community in regard to what their preferred options might be. Yeah. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit, please?
Thank you, Town Clerk. So on the latter point there of the consultation and what's that sort of illuminated to us, we had two written responses from residents in the Buttercup Mead estate, which essentially called to our attention that they were favourable to the transformation of the play area into a sort of pleasant seating area, but that they did want to have some kind of input into how that area would actually look. So we have undertaken to go back to the residents, all residents, not just the two in Buttercup Mead, with some initial outline for what the seating plan should look, the landscapes area would look like, what we're proposing, following this committee and council to come. That's on that aspect there, consultation. On what we're actually saying for the area, I'll allow Jonathan, as it's done with fair hand, the drawings.
Yeah, I mean, the landscaping that's there is just to sort of improve that area. But I think the other thing is it could also be a cheaper option, maybe to go just straight down to glass. That's the other option. So with another seat place.
Okay. Do you mind? Would you mind? Okay. So when you look at this diagram, members, yep. Although we've had a relatively small response from the community, the two responses that we have had have effectively suggested to us that rather than doing away with all of the old equipment, because it is redundant and unsafe to use now, that we could sensitively try and incorporate small elements of that into some form of floor display. So it might be that some metal work that's been there for some period of time could sit in the center of something, and we could make something pictorial around the outskirts of that. That's an option. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It'd be the dragon, really, which is it's a wooden dragon, and it's a bench, but 3 pieces could be put into the flower bed. And I thought that would be a good way of showing that the site wanted a play area and how's a seat area. Just for that, just to show that that's what it was previously.
Some recognition of history, yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So issue number one for debate for you, and it's not so terribly easy to look at these diagrams, is would you like a plain fit for purpose area that effectively is agreeing with 2 benches and is much better than it currently is with minimal cost? Or would you prefer something slightly more attractive that the local community have suggested as being their preferred option? So that's question number 1.
Okay. Would somebody like to put that forward as a resolution? Councillor North?
Yes, well, I am in favour of that option. And if you wish, I will propose that we agree to put down the flower beds as described in the plan.
The flower beds, do you prefer option 2 with the flower beds?
Well, I thought that was option 1.
I believe if I understand the town clerk, he's saying that we don't put flower beds.
All right, that's option 1. It's just plain grass.
Just plain grass with benches.
Option
Is
2
that
is,
correct?
and that is what the residents are saying they would prefer.
I don't think so.
What are they saying they would prefer then?
They are saying exactly that. They are saying that they would like, am I correct? but they would like a more pictorial display. Is that correct?
With flower beds and the trees.
Yeah.
Right, well, I'm proposing that we adopt option 2. That's all.
Option 2. Okay, David, but there's only second for that. Not as yet, okay. Councillor Mark Foster. Okay, Councillor Knight.
I think Councillor Fage said his mic on for longest, if that counts as a hand up. No, it doesn't.
Oh, that was an accident, but I do have a comment. I can see why we would want something more pictorial. The only thing that I'm mindful of is the amount of work that this would add to the schedule of works that, the book of work that we have for the public realm team. So I'm looking at shrubs here that might need replanting and flowers which we know are quite time consuming to maintain. So I'd just like to get the view of how many man hours it would take to look after this, because this is a very small corner of our community. We can definitely do better than what we've got, but definitely don't want to be having 2 members of the public realm team spending 2 days keeping this up to date every sort of 6 months or so.
If I could follow straight on, please. Thank you. So yeah, that was one of my questions, actually. For the 2 options, do you have a sense of what the maintenance might be? I mean, the budget that's mentioned here, £5,500, I presume that's materials and not labour. And it sounds like quite a big number. So is that sort of the upper end? And can you give an indicative cost for the 2? Because it does seem a big pot of money for a small area. But I think, yeah, understanding that sort of maintenance overhead going forward and the cost would help us to make that decision. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the biggest cost is actually taking the play area out within that's quite a big cost. Because you've got to drill it all out, Kango all the equipment out and everything, and then backfill with soil and turf. So, and obviously the shrubs, we'd be doing the shrubs ourselves, I would think, but maybe within that cost.
So you're looking to use a contractor to clear the ground?
Yeah, I mean, that's one way to lower the cost. We could get them to do the work and we put the shrubs in. That would be the ideal.
Would you mind if I ask the question? Because I want absolute clarity in regard to this. So we have 2 options on the table.
Yeah.
Option number 1, green space, simple.
Yep.
How much will that likely to cost?
Roughly about half that.
2,500.
We put a figure in there for 9,000, roughly 4.5. So,
Thank you. So the range of costs subject to either option, if you like, that we're looking at here is we've had one quote in, which is when Jonathan mentioned 9,000 so far. That is for the upper end, which goes even beyond what we've initially spec'd out in this drawing here. We're awaiting a second quote from the same supplier and then 2 other quotes as per the guidance and rules that Central Bedfordshire have asked us for. The work has to be done by our understanding by a contractor, third-party contractor essentially, to qualify for the Section 106 funds. That's what we've been informed by Central Beds. So we're at this stage, it's unfortunate that we can't say exactly which quotes have come in terms of upper and lower estimates, but that's what we're estimating, that option 1, if that's the grass area with the benches and pretty much it as a clean area, will be in the £2,500 to £3,000 range, and then the other option will come in at the full 5,500.
Thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Mark Foster now?
Thank you. I'm in danger here of being critical, and I don't want to be critical. So what I want to be is try and be constructive here, and this to be taken in a positive way. So, as a member of the committee, I've come to a meeting with a document that details a design that is our proposal. I come to a meeting and then I'm advised that there is another option that has been put forward, which is not part of the papers. So I haven't considered that as being, and the recommendation, I'm not sure which recommendation relates to this paperwork because it's not clear. Well, I've now been advised that there's a £9,000 quote for one thing. There's nothing in the papers to indicate this. And again, I'm not trying to be critical here. I'm just saying I'm coming to a meeting with not enough information to be able to make a balanced and valued judgment based on the information here. The feedback that you've got from 2 emailed responses seems to indicate one thing or another, and I'm not clear what the information is. Both seem to say, as she says, that the play area is tired. My understanding was with the Buttercup Mead area was that we were looking to cleanse originally. That was my understanding. So to have the brief here that's then got part of the wooden furniture or the wooden play equipment, which is deemed to not be, it's not unsafe, but it's not to be as good as it could be. To have that included in a design here, for me, doesn't seem to make sense. But I listen to what you're saying here. But again, I don't like coming to a meeting when I've got to then find out the information at the meeting. I should not be in a position where I'm finding out things at the meeting. I should be asking questions on the information I've got, and that is not what I've got here. Now, if I'm talking out of turn and others don't agree, that's fine, but that's my view, and I understand officers work hard on these things, and there's always a risk with me when I say I don't want to upset anybody, but I just want to know, why is it that we've got half a picture? I don't want half a picture, I want a full picture.
Okay, thank you. Let's bring in the town clerk to respond.
It's probably easier if I do the speaking.
Okay, so this is an evolving picture, Councillor Foster, an evolving picture. This is not the end of the road in regard to a full decision. Okay, now the papers in front of you talk about an option. That option is the option that the residents have suggested as being their preferred option, bearing in mind that they were consulted on what was the future. The chair won't mind me saying that in the production of these papers, we have also consulted the chair. That particular piece of information in regard to an option has been something that the chair has asked us to include as something that they might like to consider. Yeah, so this is not a cleanse recommendation at this point in time. We do not have a full and detailed sense of cost.
Can I come back on that?
Can I just, as a member of the committee rather than chair on this, I'd really like to give my 5 pence on this. I've always been of the opinion that the Buttercup Mead play area needs to be removed, needs to be grassed over, and needs to be very easy to maintain. The reason for that is that the Stratton Leisure Centre is just down the road, and you do not need a play area there. It's not used. And the idea of utilising any of those wooden structures in that dragon there is ludicrous, because and the idea is, and when the residents were written to, it says this letter is seeking your feedback on the town council's intention to close the Buttercup Mead area. Well, if that's the case, why are we even putting forward suggestions that includes old play area stuff? The idea is to get rid of it. And I accept what Councillor Fage has said, is that we're looking for something that's easy to maintain in the future. So that's my side of it. Councillor Fage.
Okay, I'll make a proposal then. So look, I think
Not
it wasn't
seconded,
seconded.
Councillor. Unless somebody wants to second, somebody want to second Councillor North's proposal? So, okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll look to make a proposal then. So I don't think it's unreasonable to have spent a bit of staff time taking on board the feedback that's come from residents, albeit a small sample. They are people who live down the street, and to come up with some options for us to consider. In my view, it looks like this is something which would probably take up quite a bit of staff time that could perhaps be diverted elsewhere. And if I look at similar roads in the area, Lilac Grove, Poppy Fields, for example, they have a few small patches of green grass that look absolutely fine. They don't need anything that would require quite a bit of our manpower to maintain, shall we say. So I'll make a proposal that we simply grass over this area, rather than going, and perhaps we can look to put in place some low maintenance shrubs at some point. Perhaps there can be an operational decision there. But I don't think we should be spending any more on this than a couple of £1,000 to clear the area, grass it over and make good. So I'd like to make that proposal, please.
Can I just ask you to add to that some seating? A seat within that, so grassed over, but a seat there.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So the proposal is that we grass it over together with the seat. Is anybody prepared to second that? Okay, lots of seconds. All those in favour? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Strong.
Thank you. I think this is probably the sensible proposal because it seems to give us all options in the future as well as at the moment. So that seems to be entirely sensible, but I've been getting a little bit confused on the financing here because we've got 5,500 from Section 106 monies. And that was I anticipating when I came here was going to be the total cost of everything. And we found out now we need to have contractors in to do the clearance, which may well be appropriate, and that's a major part of the funding. So that's one thing. So I'm just concerned about how the figures are coming out without it being absolutely clear, following on possibly from Councillor Mark Foster's comments. I'm not so sure now what the effect is overall financially, whether it's going to eat into the committee's budget overall for next year or how it's going to apply. I'm not even sure how the Section 106 funding applies because how much do we get if we go down what I may call the minimalistic route of tidying up and making it grassed as per Councillor Fage's proposal, which I think is the sensible thing because in the future, if we've got the time and the money, then perhaps we can do something a bit more advanced. But I just don't understand all the financing elements, and it'd be helpful, I think, for the committee to know as a whole.
Thank you, Councillor Strawn. Can I just bring in our Chief of Finance?
Thank you, Chair. The reason why we haven't given you any breakdown in terms of how much the place will cost is two reasons. One, the Section 106 funds that we are expecting to use for this project, they wouldn't give it to us, they will only pay it to a contractor. So the initial plan of us doing the work ourselves is not an option for us. So we were forced to go out there and source a contractor to do it in order to be able to access the funds. And also, because we have this meeting, to be able to even access the Section 106 funds, we need 3 codes. But I wanted an indicative figure for if somebody asked the question. So Jonathan went out there and got me 1 code. But we will be coming, once you make a decision on, yes, we should go ahead with taking all the stuff out and grassing it over with 2 benches, I will come back either via email or in a meeting with 3 codes showing you the cost that we are hoping to come as close to the Section 106 money as possible. And that's the only way we can get the funds. So financially, we're working behind the scenes on that to get that to you. And also, that is my addressing the quotes with a few, if that's okay. And also the clarity, one thing I need to clarify is whether we put something in there as the residents wanted, or we put 2 benches and the grass, that initial outlay cost for the contractors to qualify for the money is still 5.5K. Any additional thing we do there is just the finishing. So the option is still option 1, but it's the finishing that has 2 options for us. Thank you.
I'm going to call on the town clerk just to come back on anything he wants to come back on. Then I'm going to take the vote. Okay, but the vote has been, we have a resolution, it's been seconded. To give the town clerk one more chance to speak, and then I'm going to vote on this.
I'm going to give up speaking to members. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a proposal from Councillor Fage, seconded by a number of people. All those in favour? Any against? That's unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on then. So we now move on to item 6. 6, Roman letter 2, to updating and refurbishing of 2 smaller play areas. So we have plans here for the 2 smaller play areas, which are Poppy Fields 1 and Playfield Close. I'm going to call on who's going to introduce this, Officer Wise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So myself and Jonathan will introduce this. I refer councillors to the pack, agenda pack, with the suggested options for Poppy Fields 1 and Playfields Close, drawings for those, both current and future proposed options. Taken together, these two suggested options would come to just under £14,000, 14, which clearly is beyond the scope of the difference in what would be remaining from the Buttercup Mead Section 106 funding, just for clarity.
That includes the cost of the 2 E-Cup units, the 2 new units.
Correct, Mr. Chairman.
And
Yes.
any other work.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
Jonathan, do you want to set out actually what we're proposing in terms of what these areas would look like once we introduce the E-Cup units?
Yeah. Has everybody seen the E-Cup unit?
We've now got a picture of it. Thank you.
So basically that's a small climbing frame slide, little steps and everything. And it's quite an active piece of equipment. One would be replacing in Poppy Field, it would be replacing the wooden pig that's there. And in Playfield Close, it'd be going on the little grass area adjacent, which has nothing on it at the present moment.
So this same unit is proposed for both, essentially on these 2 smaller play areas. Basically, you're saying the E-Cup units go into both of them.
Yeah.
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 And the other units that are there, the other items that are there are those that were already there. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Trying to
And
keep it
Playfield Close, you've got
Keep it simple.
2 Springer rockers, and then you've got a 4-way Springer
Okay.
rocker. And then it would be a complement to that play area, which is quite minimal equipment on it.
Okay. So we've heard there's a £14,000 expenditure expected on this. I'll throw it open. Any comments? Councillor Fage?
Yeah, this seems very sensible to me, actually. I think this seems like a good price for 2 play areas where we don't have other play areas in the town. I'm looking at the photos. I've had a look at them as well in person. And whilst these are never going to be our flagship play areas, that's not a reason why they can't be nice, particularly small children's play areas for these corners of town. So I think I'd like to hear what others have to say, but I think I'm happy to propose both of the designs as they're laid out.
Okay. Before I ask for a second, now I'll just ask the town clerk, because he's desperately trying to gesticulate.
Can I just be absolutely clear about the money here, just so that people understand what we're talking about? Okay, so we have one sum of money for the first piece of work that we talked about, which is section 106. Yep. And there may be some overspill connected to that, but there will be a relatively small overspill. This potential piece of work will cost in the region of £14,000, of which we currently don't have. So this would be sourced by a successful PWLB loan.
Out of the 122,000?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
I think,
so as long as I just want to
understood.
be absolutely certain about this. So from a timeline perspective, the as-is and 2B pictures are generally okay in describing what we want to happen. But please be conscious that even if you were to vote for this, there is a kind of time lapse between saying that you're in favour of this and then the council having sufficient funds to enable it to happen. Thank you.
So, Councillor Mark Foster.
Take that on board. Agree. Does it show, where does it show in the report the £14,000?
It doesn't, Councillor Foster. I'll save you looking it up because it doesn't.
So again, I make the point that you're asking councillors to make a decision on whether they like the idea or don't like the idea. I don't know how much it's costing until I come to the meeting. I know we've built in £122,000 of Public Works Loan Board. I don't know in the report, before I come to this meeting, again, and I'm labouring the point here, I do not want to come to a meeting where it might be this, it might be that. And I appreciate that this is something that it may be just be me, and I may be being difficult, but I don't like coming in where it could be this, it could be, it should be in the report, it should be documented, so councillors can say, as part of the refresh of this particular play area, that element is going to cost that, and that element is going to cost that. And and there's a danger here that I'm going to be repeating the same message all the way through it, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to be negative or critical, but I get frustrated because of that reason. So for future meetings, Chairman, can I just a second? Future meetings, Chairman, I would like that we record the fact that we are at a point where we should be fully staffed within the Public Land and Open Spaces team. If that is the case, the information should be available. It should be clear for members to make a valued decision. I don't want to come to a meeting when I see all update, frankly.
I think we've got the point, Councillor Foster. Thank you very much. I'm going to bring in firstly Councillor Strawn, then our Finance Officer, then Councillor Knight, in that order. Councillor Strawn.
I'm delighted Councillor Mark Foster is here today because I don't have to repeat what he's saying, because I must say I'd like to understand the financing. The question I have, which has possibly been answered by the clerk, which I was going to ask on the previous question, Section 106 monies. From what the clerk just said, am I correct in understanding that any monies on the Section 106 not used up on Buttercup Mead can be used towards this? Or did I misunderstand what was being said? Because I'd like to know
I'm sure our Finance Officer will answer this question when she comes to speak, Councillor Strawn, which is now.
Please.
Sorry. The reason why I want the Section 106 money is there is a clock ticking on it. I have to use it by the 31st. So we have to use all of it. We can't use any of it for our own projects. Thanks to CBC. Hopefully in future that will change, but now the answer is no. So we can only use that money in this financial year. We can use it to do something else, but in this financial year, not the next one. The reason why it won't spill over to the 122 that we want to spend in the next financial year is that it's going to go via PWLB loan, like the town clerk rightly reminded us. And by the time we finish that whole process, in whatever we would have started in any designated play area that you agree tonight, would have, whatever is left over would have, the inflation would have swallowed it up. So from my point of view, I think the 5K is not enough to do what we want to do in Buttercup, but I would, as these guys were telling you, I'm pushing them to bring me a quote that will be below or exactly that. I'm not looking forward to a quote that is above that to do it. Now, coming back to Councillor Foster, I really like your engagement in the meeting, because the reason why we haven't given you this information in this meeting, because it's been given in previous meeting, and I am of the opinion that I don't like bombarding you guys with too much information, but we've given the detail of each play area, how much it will cost, the existing machines that is there, what we intend to replace them by. So now that you have expressed the appetite to have the paperwork, I'm happy to give it to you. So you have it.
So may I come back on that? Just one second.
Just one point.
So
Councillor
my point being here, if the documents are not just for us. They are not just for us. Documents are for residents to see what we're doing. If you have not read the papers for previously, and why should you? If you come to this and look at the papers in this meeting, the papers should reflect what the committee is discussing at that point. So it's irrelevant what we've been told before. This meeting should have the things that we're considering in front of us. So when you understand where I'm coming from, and members understand, it's about what we're discussing right now in this meeting, not what we just discussed before. And if I have to labour the point, I don't want to. I just want the message to get through that if I or other members are coming to a committee and the information is not there, you're going to get the same thing from me. And I apologise in advance if that's the case.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Now, Councillor Knight.
Thank you. I would like to see these two play areas refurbished. However, I completely agree with Councillor Foster that I'm very uneasy making a decision tonight on the basis of verbal information. A committee meeting needs to stand as a whole. All of the information relevant to the decision needs to be presented to us in advance, in writing, please not in verbal updates. This is public money we're spending. I don't care where it comes from, whether it's a loan that we have to pay back or 106 money that could be used for another project. It's public money and we have a duty to spend that money wisely. And my final whinge is, I've mentioned when we've discussed this before, that before we refurbish play areas, which I'm very supportive of, we need to understand the demographic. Now, I've been to visit these sites, but I genuinely do not know, unfortunately, how many families live nearby with small children. And I think that's important to understand, because if all the children have grown up and it's now teenage families, we could be we're using the wrong equipment. So have we done the demographic study? Do we understand the number of children of the appropriate age within the catchment area? Do we understand what the catchment area is? And can we be sure this won't be a white elephant?
Town clerk.
I think that councillor Mike makes an interesting issue, which is should members be driven by volumetrics and demand and future usage, or should they be driven by perception of need? Yep. Now, you going back to what Councillor Foster was saying, and our finance head of finance, there's lots of detailed historical information here that's been going on for months now that's been shared with members before, and it's sometimes difficult to kind of recapture that in another meeting. Now, I know that Jonathan and Karim will have a view about whether or not these two areas are the most important areas in their professional perspective, particularly our public realm manager, who knows much more about these things than I do, or whether or not from a political perspective and members' perspective, you feel, because your sense and your closeness to the community, that these are things that you would want to be treated as a priority. So I'd be very interested with the chair's guidance in regard to this.
My comment on Councillor Knight's point is, if we, how would we go about getting the information that's required? Would we presume, or perhaps you can just answer that question.
I'm not an expert, so I guess a census, if we're consulting with the community, we ask the community, there are ways we can do it. Maybe, I don't know whether it's been done. I'm just nervous that if we're looking to spend, what, 15 grand, and we don't know. Now, maybe if some members here live very nearby, overlook it, understand the demographic better than I, then maybe they can reassure me. I would just hate to put kit in that's for the wrong age group, and it feels like that's a risk if we're not evidence and data driven.
Councillor Bond, not a member of this committee, but please be welcome, Councillor Bond, but always interested in your input.
I think I might as well be a member because I attended most of the meetings. Okay, now I don't know what it's in the current form, but in the past, the post office PAF file used to contain ward information demographics. I don't know if it's updated anymore. So that data must be freely available without us having to go and work it out ourselves.
Councillor Strawn.
On the same point, and an slightly additional point, the census was carried out last year. The results have been published, and it would be possible to get a detail of the demographics from a survey of the census if we had the resources to do so, which, with respect, I doubt whether we probably have at the moment, but that would actually give us a snapshot as a year ago. So that would be one possibility. The other thing that doesn't seem to be covered in the report at all is the surfacing of the areas, and whether we're going to have to look at new rubber surfaces or whatever, and how that fits into the costing, which again really I think comes back to the point that's already been well made about information.
I see Councillor Grant Phage has his hand up again. I think he may wish to make some comment on his earlier proposal.
No, it's okay. I mean, I do think we're at risk of, so if we were to use the census, I don't suspect we're going to get down to a street by street level analysis, which is what we're looking at here, right? This is Playfield Close, this is Elm Road, this is the probably north end of Mead End. They're probably the streets that might use the Playfield Close site, maybe a few on London Road. We're not going to have that house by house analysis or that breakdown. The only way we're going to get it is by doing a door to door, knocking on doors and asking people, do you use this play area? And I'm not going to do that. I'm not. If others are keen to, you know, put your hand up, but you know, we can't, we're at risk of stalling decisions based on, we're making the perfect the enemy of the good if we're not careful, I think, and we're also at risk of over academic, sort of making this a little bit more academic than it needs to be. We're making a judgment about, I'd absolutely take the points, we need to think strategically about where we invest in our play areas, but it also needs to be proportionate to the amount we're looking to spend relative to the overall sort of funds we have available to this. $500,000, we're looking at spending 14,000 of it. I think I probably have enough information that I need to make this decision. Appreciate would probably have liked the £14,000 known in advance. But in terms of the knowledge of Biggleswade that we all have, at some point, councillors are going to have to make a value judgment. That's why we're here. So my proposal stands. It hasn't been seconded yet, but that's very well.
Councillor North is prepared. So we have a proposal, we have it seconded. The town clerk wishes to speak.
I'd like to ask a question, please, of officers. So I want some clarity here. So the £14,000 that we're talking about, yeah, is indicative and a flavour of what the potential costs might be. I want absolute clarity that this is one quotation that's come through. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And it's an indicative sense of cost. That's what it is. So what we're talking about here is a point in time. Yeah. This is indicative sense for members that it will roughly cost in the region of this amount of money. Is that correct? Yes? Yes. Good. Thank you.
Could I just also say that while I've been on site, I have done a bit of saying demographic, spoken to people, as I have at every site. I've been back to the sites maybe 6, 7, 8 times, and there's been people on site, they've asked me what I'm doing. And I've spoken to them about their desires for the place as well. So that hasn't come out all the way through in this, but some of the flavour of what I want to put in is actually dictated by what the people that I've spoken to as well. That's what I was trying to say.
I would like to say that we do have in our public realm manager someone with considerable experience in this matter. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm prepared to listen to what he has to say and give that the credence that it deserves. Have you anything different to say, Councillor Knight?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. So I think for this play area, or these two, I'm willing to be pragmatic and support it on the basis of what I've heard.
Yeah.
What I ask, though, is because we're looking at spending much more money going forward at refurbishing a lot of other play areas,
yeah.
And my colleague sat next to me has been looking up open census data while we're here.
Yeah.
Can we please do that analysis for future play areas? So when we're looking to spend much larger sums of money, we are doing that with the evidence to back it up, please. That's all I ask.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we have a proposal that for those two play areas, we spend an indicative sum of £14,000. We're putting a new unit in each of those areas. We're keeping 2 of the existing units there. And we're going to go ahead with that as and when the public loan becomes available. All those in favour? Any against? That's unanimous. Thank you.
May I just make one further point? Sorry. I apologise, it wasn't actually me. So I think we're losing a wooden pig in one of the play areas, and obviously the changes to the Buttercup Mead one means that we'll lose some wooden structures there. Maybe, and this doesn't need to be a formal decision, it's operational, but maybe when we do remove some of these particularly wooden structures, they are things which, if there is a possibility of making good at a price, that could feature perhaps round the green wheel or something like that. It's not a decision for today, but as long as we don't scrap them, we have a bit of space to store them in the in the depot, and maybe it's something we can look at a future date.
That's a very good idea. A certain amount of perhaps painting them in some way in the correct stuff. But I think Jonathan has already indicated that he would want to do that anyway.
The whole purpose of the process that Peter set me off on when I first came here was really to look at everything and overall, and then look at what was needed, not just for when I'm here, but perhaps beyond my time here and beyond others' time here. So that was the thought process behind it. And to make, if you went to the site at Playfield Close, you'd see that there's not much variety there. But just by putting one piece of equipment in, I know it seems expensive, but at quite a reasonable cost, I think, you get so much more exciting playground for children playing. And also with that one in particular, the people there were requesting, it's all right for toddlers, but it's not all right for the next level up. So it's looking beyond what we've got there and then thinking outside the box, really. So.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to come back, Town Clerk?
Yeah, this is kind of a bit unusual here, but I've got an ask of officers if they can. I mean, I know about these things because I've been briefed about them, but we need to make sure that members really do understand what we're talking about. So I've got a request of officers, which is, can we be very succinct and specific of the difference between the as is and the to be options that you've got on the table. Members need to practically understand what those options are. Yeah, so if we can be very clear about that when we're talking about it, that would really be helpful. Thanks.
Okay. I'm going to move on now to Franklin's play recreation area. Before we get to that, I'd like to say I've had an examination of this in some sort of detail, and I've been able on the plan that we have for the Franklin's area. I've been able to match up most of the symbols on the plan with the pictures provided. What I haven't been able, those that I've been able to match up add up to £69,298.80. So, Councillor Foster, I'm sure you'll be pleased to know that's what the amount is, and I needed to know for myself. And I do, by the way, agree with you entirely that those figures should have been in the report. So I'm not being sarcastic. I'm saying genuinely that is what the figure is shown there. So that, together with the 14,000, is considerably less than the £122,000 we're considering. And this, whatever we decide on this, is the same as the other thing with regard to, it all depends on the public loan and everything else. So just before we consider this any further, I'm just going to give you the benefit of my examination on this. All of these things on there, other than I don't see any picture of the play space 1. I don't see any picture of the adult gym. Right, but other than that, all those other items that are on the plan, on the Franklin's future plan, are there. Having said that, I'll now pass over to the strategic man and ask you to. I can't remember what title; it's so long. Please carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So, when it comes to Franklin's, we've got an overall control total of 122,000 for year 1, which we've set out. Once we've now agreed to recommend a resolution that we're going to potentially be spending 14,000 for the 2 areas as options, on which we just discussed, which council has just discussed, that also has to come out from the 122,000 overall cost envelope. I don't mean to be negative, but I have to be clear as well that the equipment list for Franklin's adds up to 69,000 and a bit extra, just under £70,000. That does not include the costs, the labour costs for breaking the earth, taking everything out and making it all good, reinstalling in the soft surfaces, etc. That, when it's all added up, I'm afraid, comes to 122,000 in its own right. Speaking clearly, for Franklin's. There's another additional.
Actually, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Are you saying that it comes to 122,000 for Franklin's?
Just under.
Just under. So what about the 14,000 then?
So that is what I would classify with respect as being an option which we could look at for the other 2 areas. So there's, as Councillor Foster said earlier, and again for Franklin's, essentially having all the information in front of us, the way we're talking this through is a series of options for years 1 and thereafter. So we could potentially start with Franklin's. We wouldn't necessarily fully complete it were we to do the other 2 options, which are for Playfield, Poppyfield and Playfield areas for 14,000 for. So there'll be an overspill into year 2, if you like, financially speaking. I'll pause there.
Can I ask a question?
Town clerk.
And I understand what you've said, but I think it's sometimes difficult to follow. So effectively what you're saying to us is if we are to afford the other resolution that members just made, yes, we need to potentially shrink the overall cost of Franklin's by £14,000. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Fage.
Sorry, I keep putting my hand up first, but okay. At least we know that. Thank you for the transparency over it. The other option is to do some of the delivery around Franklin's in year 2, isn't it? That you don't have to necessarily we don't necessarily have to do all of this in year 1, drill down this full amount. So I'm actually of the view, I think I did make this point at the last Public Land and Open Spaces Committee meeting, or it might have been F&GP, but we're considering drilling down considerably more on the public works loan in year 2 to 300-ish thousand. And Kitelands was one of the parks that would be done in year 2. I personally, I'd rather see more money spent on Franklin's because I think it needs it more. So in terms of what we have in front of us, I have a few comments on what we have in front of us. So I like the equipment. I think it looks good, and it's a big improvement on what we currently have. I'd question why we're taking out some of the existing equipment, and perhaps we could talk to that in a moment, because obviously that comes at a cost, and some of it looks okay. It's not great, but at least it's there. So why we're taking out some of the existing equipment? I would at some point like some thought given to sort of the wider sort of, not just the equipment in this park, because there's a lot of space in this park that has some very nice trees in it. Perhaps we want to incorporate some nice benches. The current metal ones are terrible in there. So that's something that we maybe need to think about as well and need a plan for, just sort of the wider landscaping. So I'd like to know those two things up front, but other than that, I'm quite happy with what's in front of us. The one point, I would just make 2 more points. So Sandy has a flagship park on Bedford Road. It's not dissimilar to Franklin's in many ways. And one thing that they've done really well with their equipment is it almost seems sort of quite professionally color coordinated. It sounds silly, but it's funny what equipment, which is not, you know, at the moment we've got a black rocker there and a red and yellow thing and something which is a different color. I think to help keep it looking more professional and the sort of place where children want to, that would catch people's eye, I think that would be beneficial. The only other thing, and this is very, very tiny, is we're looking at some play equipment for disabled children potentially, which I think is a wonderful initiative. The only thing we just got to be careful about is whether they can actually get into this park, because there is a kissing gate there. So I wouldn't want to put that in, and the kissing gate. Sorry, there's several points there, and I haven't made a proposal, but those are my initial points.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you. I'm very keen to get for Franklin Play Area to be improved. Absolutely. I'm very clear that it's of the two. There's 2 key play areas. Saxon is one, and Franklin is the other. Sorry, Kitelands is one. Sorry, and Franklin is the other. When the first iteration of this, I was a little bit frustrated, but I'm glad that we now have the images of what the equipment is going to look like. That has certainly helped sort of clarify the sort of the plans and the proposals. So I welcome that. I think perhaps what I would have hoped to have seen is, you know, we've got images. So somehow trying to translate Wildcat multi-goal, I've got to go through and try and, so again, it's about how the information is presented. I think that what's actually what we're proposing is good, but it's trying to get the information so it's clear. It's not about, and you know, if I can, you know, if we've got the documents available, there should be no reason why someone with, you know, snippet, copy and paste shouldn't be able to go, right, that's going to be there, that's going to be there. It's not a difficult thing to do, to be able to graphically demonstrate what the equipment is going to look like. So again, I'm trying not to be negative, but
you're looking forward. It's another point on the clarity of information.
But we are, you know, labouring the point.
I think your point's taken on board, Councillor Foster. Thank you for making. Town Clerk.
Thank you. Like Councillor Foster, very keen to see this area refurbished. I'm currently not minded to vote in favour of this proposal. I'm uncomfortable with the level of detail that's here. I would like to, obviously a lot of thought has gone into the layout, but I would like to understand more about the different zones, the age groups they're targeting, the age groups that the equipment is suitable for. And I'm minded to think, is this something that it's good that we're having this conversation. Do we need to have more information and review this again at the next PLOS, given we've already agreed to move forward with a couple of the areas, in fact, 3 areas. And in fact, is there any enormous urgency to race this through now, or would we do better to look at this in a bit more detail with maybe some slightly more information in front of us, just to make sure we're making the best possible decision. So that's the way I currently.
I have to say I entirely agree with you, Councillor Knight. Councillor Strawn.
Thank you, Chairman. Apart from the fact I nearly had a heart attack when I found out how expensive these bits and pieces of equipment are when I looked at it, which slightly blew my mind. I'm delighted that we at least know now roughly what we're spending overall, because I did a back of the paper calculation and about 6,000 out on my initial quotes. But what I'd also like to know is what's happening throughout the recreation ground, because if I've understood the plan correctly, there is no actual mention made of the old pool that's in there. I'd like to know what is happening with regard to that. And I share Councillor Knight's concern about the detail. I think the principle I'm all for, and I'm all for spending the appropriate sum of money and raising the Public Works Loan Board for Franklin, if that is something that we can usefully do tonight to agree the principle. But the detail, I think we need more detail. What soft areas are needed to support the equipment? Do the equipment costs include the installation costs? There's a lot of questions that are there which have been laboured very much tonight, and for a very good reason. I think when we're looking at spend, we've felt 14,000, it's poor. For £100,000 plus of council taxpayers' money, whether it's by Public Works Loan Board or not, is irrelevant. It is a lot of money that we're committing the town to, and we've got to get it right. So I think the practical proposal, and I'll put this for tonight, that we agree that Franklin's Recreation Ground should be upgraded in a form to be agreed after further consultation, but that in the meantime, we submit an application to the Public Works Loan for a Public Works Board loan to cover those works of an estimated cost of, I'm not sure whether it's now 108,000 or 122,000, but that I think it's essential that we get the Public Works Loan Board in motion. But equally, I don't think we can actually agree on the detail of what we're doing, because I personally don't feel we've got enough detailed explanation today to make that decision.
Chairman, a point of order, Chairman. I don't think we can have a motion here relating to the application for the Public Works loan, because the council has already agreed to make that application, have they not? And that is proceeding, presumably.
Okay.
So that's, I would suggest to Councillor Strawn that bit of it is taken off.
Thank you to Councillor North. I'm going to call in the town clerk, and I'm going to ask Councillor Knight to make a proposal based on what he said.
Just a couple of observations, if I can. Is that right to speak?
Yes, please.
Is that all right? Yeah. Firstly, I would much rather have seen a more glossy, professional picture of the as-is and the to-be, so that I can better understand this. And it clearly isn't there at the moment. And I think there's a learning opportunity there to make sure that we have the right software in place to enable us to articulate that better going forward. I think there's absolutely no doubt about that. That's issue number one. Issue number two is, having said that, I'll try and talk over the clock. It's probably fundamentally okay. It feels like it's probably okay, stressing the word probably, but I want to be convinced of a kind of more professional sense that we've ticked all the boxes. And there's probably quite a lot of information there, but I'd like to see some more. That's the second point I'd make. The third point I would make is that if we think of it from a timeline perspective, and the PWLB loan that we've talked about, officers will now be reaching out to the community to send out the right comms messages to explain properly to the community as part of the process and the engagement process, and to seek guidance from whether or not the community would support members' perceptions. Yeah, that will take a number of months. It will take, as we talked about before, 4+ months or somewhere in that region. Having done that, if there's then a positive response from the community, we then need to reach out and make proper bids for the monies. And then hopefully we will be successful. So there is a lead time into all of this that could run to 4, 5, 6, 7 months, worst case scenario. Is that correct? Yes. Yep. Is there anything you'd like to reiterate on top of what I've just said?
May I thank you just briefly, going back to your first point, Mr. Town Clerk, was on the software. In the ideal world, we would have a piece of relatively good value for money software where we could generate these maps, which would look shiny, glossy, and be inviting. The other fix to this is, as we're going out for quotes, we can ask contractors to come in and quote us and then actually do the designs for us. That's where we're minded to go with this. So we'll bridge that gap in terms of expectation, hopefully.
Okay, before I call out Councillor Knight, Councillor. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Kevin. So I don't think any of this is wasted, because the risk is that, you could have spent 2 weeks of staff time putting together a glossy, all singing, all dancing design and outsourcing it to a contractor to put together something beautiful, bringing it to Public Lands and Open Spaces Committee, and then us saying, no, we don't want that. And that wouldn't have been the right thing to do. And that's not what's happened. So I'm comfortable with what we've got, but we now just need to think about, this is the perfect check-in, sort of sense check from PLOS committee. The question is now, where do we go from here, and what's the instruction of the committee of how to proceed? So I don't know if anybody wants to make a proposal. I know Councillor Brown hasn't spoken yet, but I think Councillor Knight probably does. But my thinking would be along the lines of starting to cement really get proper quotes, really understand exactly how much this is going to cost. And that's everything from the play equipment to the benches, what that's going to look like in a design, and then put those finances in front of us so that we're able to make an informed decision around this set of equipment. I'd be comfortable with a proposal along those lines, but I'll let someone else make it.
Councillor Brown.
There's a lot of criticism, constructive criticism tonight, and rightly so. But on a more positive note, a lot of the equipment there is absolutely fantastic, and I see this as massive improvements. It's been said previously at a previous meeting. One thing I've noticed tonight on this particular site is the lack of benches, and on all the other sites we've talked about benches. I think it's very necessary in these areas. And on that point, I'd like to see somewhere on the council website an opportunity for residents to pay for a little plaque to go on the bench, because many of them would see it as a memorial to relatives within the community. And I think that there should be a minimum donation, as well as the cost of the plaque, a minimum donation to the bench, £50 or £100, and wherever you go, you see that across the country. So even if we get one person donating, it'll be money in the coffers, but more importantly, providing an opportunity for residents to have a memorial of their relatives in a joyous area.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Knight.
Okay, thank you. I took a moment to make a few notes for a proposal then. So I therefore propose that this committee supports the principle of upgrading Franklin's recreation ground, but defers the final decision for a detailed review at the next Public Land and Open Spaces meeting, where we would look to have a clear vision for the Franklin's recreation ground as a whole, more detailed scale drawings for the whole park, which should include age groups for different zones and age groups for the equipment, details on the adult areas where adults and parents and carers will wait and observe their children, the warranties and estimated longevity of the equipment, the play surfaces that need to be accommodated, any necessary landscaping, and of course financials in accordance with our financial regulations.
Seconded, anybody? Councillor Mark Foster seconded. All those in favour? Any against? Councillor Brown? Against. Okay, carried. Right, we now move on to Jubilee Recreation Area. And this is another one from the Head of Governance and Strategic Partnerships. I can almost say it when I read it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As briefly as I can, in terms of Jubilee Recreation Area, I have a an action to, well, actually, we've already written out to the consortium which installed a, as I understand this, a fence which cuts across our pathway, walkway in that area. We're awaiting their response in terms of what they're going to do about it. As soon as we get a response, I'm going to be discussing the medium term, if you like, plans for that area in terms of making the area that we have there very sympathetic and fitting with the good work that the consortium have already done on their side, if you like, so that we can fuse and gel a very nice area together.
Okay,
that's where we're at with that.
Councillor Strawn.
Just for a point of clarification, could we confirm what the Jubilee Recreation Area is? Because there was a Jubilee Recreation Ground up off Sandy View behind the Cat's Meat Factory estate.
Yes.
Yet I don't think that is the same Jubilee Recreation Area that we're talking about now, or is it?
Yes,
it is. It is that one.
It is the one that used to be a rubbish tip.
Yes, that's the one.
And we took away all of the play area because of the problem, and now we want to make
because there's a Jubilee Wood or something. Which
the idea is a small park area of it and a continuation to allow people from Land East to wander through.
That's absolutely fine. It's just clarifying which Jubilee, because I think there's a Jubilee Wood or something which is in danger of getting confused.
So this is an ongoing thing. Karim has updated us on where he's got so far. Any other comments? Councillor Foster.
So just in relation to the fence, I'm just trying to clarify, the fence is ours, is that correct? So, or are we not sure whose the fence is? So number one, whose is the fence? Number two, what was the conversation that we've had with the consortium alongside? I'm not clear what the conversation related to. Was it about the fence or the works? Because I seem to remember that one of our previous meetings that we were going to contact, or it was a suggestion to contact the consortium along the lines of continuing the work that they've done. So the pavement through that area and to try and to link the two areas up. But I'm not quite clear from the update from Karim what we've actually discussed with the consortium, unless I wasn't listening properly. So I'd like to understand what the nature of the conversations are or were with the consortium.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Mark Foster as well. So I have a status update here in terms of action for the Jubilee Recreation Ground from the 25th of January 2022, where officers have reviewed the report and recommendations from the previous 8th of June meeting, which was a while ago. We have sent, when I said earlier that we've contacted, so we have emailed Bellway, I think is the company, with photographs from court, and we're awaiting a response from their project manager. This was as recently as late last week. Then the response will then trigger my action to discuss the wider area, just for a bit more clarity.
So for clarity, the communication commenced last week?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
From our side.
I think it's true to say that when this matter was a live issue last year, the matter was put forward to the town clerk, and it was down to staffing that we had to undertake it as a project when the staffing improved. Now we're almost fully staffed. I expect this thing will go ahead absolutely like lightning. So that will be terrific to see. Councillor Fage.
Sure, it will go ahead like lightning if we weren't having to deal with a consortium. But no, scrap that. They're lovely. I think if my memory serves me correctly, to answer Councillor Foster's point, I think the problem is that the path that was built on the north side, which is where the development was, basically comes out in the middle of a tree. Yeah. And the Public Land and Open Spaces Committee resolved to basically ask them to reroute their side so that it would link up better with the path which is on the south side, which is near Sandy View. So as soon as we have that confirmation and a timeline for that, then hopefully can remove that part of the fence that was agreed. Yep. That's basically it, isn't it?
I'm very glad you mentioned that, Councillor Fage, and perhaps our strategic chief will mention that in his correspondence. So it's very important that we don't take down the tree. When we...
Yeah, but it'd be a selection of British flowering shrubs and trees along the footpath. That was what we'd be looking at. With probably some seating, maybe.
Okay, thank you.
Just to add, in relation to the winding footpath, I was that way the other day, and exactly as Councillor Fage mentioned, the path is in the wrong place, but actually there's now a natural path wearing in the grass in exactly the place where I suspect we would like to see it. So it's sort of happening anyway, and we just need to get the tarmac moved.
I understand where you're coming from, but my thoughts were the residents there aren't actually used to people passing their back gardens all the time. So that was my thought process in using a winding path. Moved it away and joined perhaps a little bit further up. So that was
okay. I think we can move on from this now, unless there's any other comments. No, moving on then. The allotment storage building, town clerk, please.
Okay, so just a short update. As members will recall, it wasn't too long ago that they voted on the precept. Members agreed growth monies to support the purchase of an allotment storage building. We've now got that sanction to get on and do the work. So the public realm manager will now get on, we'll get some quotations in, and we can try and make this real. Yes.
I have already started looking at that, but the costs were too high for what I was looking at. Something that may have a toilet attached to it, so just but it was a little bit too much. So it was just a thought process in the first, something I saw when I went to an exhibition.
Okay,
So,
and obviously
looking at more simplified.
As part of that process, we should do the same thing that we do with everything like this. We need to be clear about the specification that we agree, and then we should go out and make sure that we get the right quotations in. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Moving on then. Allotment track improvement and maintenance, again, town clerk.
So if I do the introduction, then Jonathan perhaps can supplement what I'm going to say. Is that all right? I'll do the introduction. Okay, so in an ideal world, if we own the land, which we clearly don't, then we would probably be moving at a faster pace connected to this issue. And we know that the Allotment Association are very keen to have some degree of hardcore down that makes the whole area more easier to use. Yep. Now, we have reached out to Central Beds. Yep. And we've tried to ascertain whether or not, firstly, our preferred option would be that Central Beds do the nature of the work because Central Beds own the land. And that feels like the proper professional route to take place. Yeah. Option 2, subject to absolute clarification from Central Beds, is that they give permission and authority for this council to carry on and do the work. Yeah. And again, it will be built on a proper specification in regard to that. And this is also about managing risk and making sure that we actually provide the right thing for the allotment community. Do you want to just compliment what I've just said?
Yeah, that was, I've been in contact with Jack Bowers, CBC. He's not come back with clarifications yet, but I'm working on it. I've got back to him, in touch with him again today. So the person has not answered his email back to me, which he passed on. So
I just think we just need to be clear that we can raise this with potential directors at Central Beds if we don't get a response within a reasonable period of time. We need to escalate it.
Yes, no,
okay.
we'll escalate it. Yeah.
Moving on then. Directional signage, public realm manager. How are we doing with that?
I'm in touch with Scott Terry, who's in charge of the, well, it's in charge of all highways work, or the person I'm in contact with on CBC that's doing highways work. I'm waiting for confirmation back from him, from the process of how to put the signs up so that the signposted roundabout on Saxon Way.
Okay. May I make a request that as and when these things move forward, can you notify, we don't need to wait until our next committee meeting. If there is some movement on these things, can we please let members know, when course, things can go ahead?
Yes, I will, Frank.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so items E, F and G are now moved to exempt. So we move on to item H, which is a tree inventory, which is an oral update from your good self, Public Realm Manager.
Wildflower meadow.
No, tree inventory.
Sorry.
The tree inventory.
Sorry, I didn't. The tree inventory. So I'm really struggling on the one hearing aid works. Sorry. Yeah, tree inventory. all the works have been logged and literally logged, and they're going to go ahead in April because the budget was a little high when we finally got all the quotes back from the 3 contracts. It lists every single tree that we've got on our land and the condition of it. None of them are in serious condition. None of them are in really poor condition, but there is work to be carried out on them all, everything from epicormic growth around the base right up to some slight dieback and things like that.
So just for absolute clarity, just to complement what Jonathan said, so we know that the tree inventory was completed some while ago and is a good piece of work done by a professional. We know that it highlights elements of work and it's a condition survey. So, you know, it's a proper professional's perspective about what needs to happen and when. Effectively, all we're doing is operationalizing this now, and members signed this off before.
Okay. Councillor Strawn?
Just a question and observation. It might be helpful for members to know where these works are going to be carried out at some stage, because it seems to be going ahead satisfactorily, but at the moment, somebody could come along and tell me a tree's being cut down, and I might come around saying, what's going on here, and find out it's all part of the process. So I think it'd be very helpful for councillors to be updated on the proposed works as and when, and it needn't be in full council. An email round, I'm sure, would be acceptable to members.
I think that's a very good point, and perhaps when the decision's made, it could also go on the website so that the general public could know when there's work going on, that it's authorised and it's all above board.
I'll make sure there's a complete order of works for every action to every tree.
Okay.
Yeah, for every site, so to speak.
Right, thank you.
Could we be notified of what that?
Yes, of
not
course.
the
Yes,
detail
of
of the
course.
actual works, but just where it's happening. And
Yes, of course. Yeah. Okay. So item I, the town clerk's asked for that also to be moved to exempt. So we just need to take a vote on this. Are you happy that this is moved to exempt?
Move that.
Yes. Everybody seems to be okay on that one. So then we move to public open session. There are no members of the public. So this part of the meeting is now closed.